Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning into this part two episode of Just Another Tinfoil Hat with guest Wild Trees. Really excited to be continuing the conversation. And if you happen to show up partway through, part one is available on my channel. So definitely check that out so you don't miss any of our fantastic conversation here. And we were just discussing, well, it was just discussing for us, for the listeners, it's probably about 2 weeks ago, we were discussing one of your really bizarre experiences with kind of these alien-esque type voices that were just talking nonsense. And that was just genuinely a very, very strange, just one of those things that I feel like classically, you say that they're speaking nonsensical, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense because it should either be, not in any language known to man, or it should be some sort of divine message, beware the atom and all that. But no, I find that so intriguing. And then too, the way that you ended the occurrence by reciting it back to them, it seems to follow that very kind of the logic of fairyland, I guess, where people can find their way back home by flipping their clothes inside out and things like that, which surprisingly enough is kind of a new trope with alien abduction narratives, people waking up and their pajamas are on inside out. Yeah, and it just very, very strange. But then was that the house too that had haunting activity, or was that a different one?
Yeah, so the house where the phone call happened, that was like a house that's set up by the Park Service next to the actual research station for visitors. So the haunting was a different house. Yeah,
Different house. Okay.
yeah. And wait, can you tell me which haunting are you referring to? I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Oh, you just mentioned one earlier. I'm not sure which one in particular it was. Have you had multiple like houses with haunting type activity or experienced that?
I've had so the I had the phone call at the research station, and then at my house where I grew up, I had like an alien abduction type scenario happen to me, and then I had like an invisible hand try to help me do something.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, those two things happened, which were pretty intense. Yeah.
That's intriguing. Just again, I'm just kind of, all over the place here. What do you think about the concept of repeater witnesses? Just, from having had multiple experiences yourself, or even from like a biological standpoint? Because it seems really that people who experience one type of phenomena, they end up having lots of other different types of phenomena kind of plague them throughout their life.
It's true. It's true. And I don't think that should be overlooked. I think you've mentioned him several times, but my boyfriend, Jack Valet, I just love him so much. And I'm a big fan of him. I believe his name is Jock Valet. I should learn how to pronounce it. But yeah, he makes a big point of talking to the witnesses and asking them questions like, what's going on in your life when this happened? What else has happened in your life? What happened before this happened? And so there's definitely a connection. But man, you know what? I'm a little lost for words. I don't really know why it keeps happening. I'm sure there's a connection, like, but I'm I don't have a specific thing like to point at and be like, that is why there's multiple encounters.
Yeah, well, and that's, honestly, I feel like I don't know is sometimes the only really valid answer there is for this phenomena, simply because, it's defined as the unexplained. And of course, the point is to try and explain it, but we shouldn't force explanations upon it if none really seem to fit. And it's incredibly odd how so many of the lines, though, seem to just absolutely blur. And so I guess I would kind of like to swing into some of the high strangeness involved with Bigfoot encounters. Because Bigfoot, I have said it before and I'll probably say it again. Bigfoot was like my first major thing with the paranormal. I had had a general interest, forever. But then my mom actually got me interested, particularly in Sasquatch. And then the rest was history. I became super interested in cryptozoology and then the rest. So I have a huge amount of nostalgia for the concept of Bigfoot as a flesh and blood animal. However, at the same point, again, as a Keelian, I can't really maintain that Bigfoot is simply, an undiscovered primate because there are so many cases of car stoppages, Bigfoot being impervious to bullets. There's this fantastic account from Silent Invasion where a woman shot at a Sasquatch and he kind of vanished in this flash of light. Things like that. So, again, considering your background in biology, I'm really intrigued to hear, first of all, do you think it's possible for some population of unknown primates, such as a Sasquatch-like creature, to exist in North America?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The there's a lot of square mileage. There's a lot of woods in the United States where people don't go there, don't go often, and that's enough for a large species to survive. The food is there, the food availability is there. Like imagine it this way. Let's say that today, let's say about 1,000 experts in wildlife. They tell themselves we're going to spread out throughout the forest in this area, and we're going to live there until we die, and nobody's going to ever see us. That is our goal. You know, I think they could do it. I think they could manage to survive without anyone ever seeing them. You know what I mean? Now
Oh yeah.
now imagine that they're like really they have hypersenses, and they're super strong. I think it's easily that they could do that. So here's the thing. Here's what I think about Bigfoot because I this is my current thinking. I think there are multiple explanations for both Bigfoot, and I think if I could take a step back, I think there are multiple explanations for the paranormal and supernatural. And I think many phenomena mimic each other, perhaps purposely, just to throw us off the trail. But I mean, in science, this happens as well. So let me see. There's this thing called, is it convergent evolution? Damn. This is like one of the most basic biological concepts. So perhaps I got it wrong. But there's this idea called convergent evolution where it's like you have a dolphin and then you have a shark and they have a penguin. Okay, one of them is a mammal, one's a bird, one's a fish. But convergently or independently, they develop the same body plan. They look almost exactly the same, but they did not influence each other. They just mimic each other. So I think that could be going on with the paranormal, with the phenomenon, like for Bigfoot, for instance. So I do think one explanation for Bigfoot is this uh, just run of the mill. This is just a hominid species. But then we get to the exotic cases, which I think we'll talk about some more. And I think they have alternate explanations as well.
That is really, really cool. And while we're on to this idea that possibly it could like, and again, I 100% agree with you. I don't think that any aspect of the paranormal can be fully explained by one single concept. I think that there are multiple explanations for everything. I mean, there's a real trap in like thinking that one unified field theory would explain all of them when there's a huge likelihood for outliers. And so with Sasquatch, that is something that I've considered lately, and again, I'm going to bring up, my buddies, the octopus, because I don't know, I have a thing for octopus. I don't know why. I just think they're cool. They also are incredibly terrifying. Literally, one of my worst fears. So you can, tell me what that says about my personality. I'm not sure. But I was reading this thing about, how they are so advanced, but on the flip side too, they're also so capable of camouflage. And in this weird like, I don't know, maybe it was divine inspiration or maybe it was just totally random. I wondered if because that's the thing that really bothers me is you'll have often too, I feel like vanishing Bigfoot accounts are among the most common high strangeness accounts that we see. It's almost run of the mill for people to just lose sight of a Sasquatch. And we could just say, oh, well, it just ducked behind some underbrush, but that explanation becomes increasingly difficult to believe when it's happening pretty much right in front of someone's face. Again, you're the biologist. Is there any capability possible for a primate species to have evolved some form of camouflage similar to like what we see in these other species like the octopus?
Yes, like absolutely. And this is one something we talked about. I think one of the keys to understanding cryptids is we have to accept that there are radical adaptations that these animals possess. I mean, beyond the scope of what is already radical. So, octopi, they have chromatophores, they have skin cells, which give them like incredible, mind blowing camouflage capabilities on the fly. You could see it online. So, and not only that, I mean, we just know we know that camouflage it's a known adaptation. Humans do it too. We were developing cloaking devices. We also wear camo gear. So that's just a common adaptation. Of course, we want to become invisible. So I think that's a good explanation for Bigfoot. I even heard one thing that they said that perhaps there's a quality to the hair that allows them to blend in or go invisible. So yeah, I think that's a possibility that we should be looking into.
Yeah, well, and I've heard you, speak before too about this idea of these radical adaptations. And I think that, again, coming from someone who as a kid was just really, really invested in cryptozoology, for these things to kind of, still be out there, for these mysteries to still exist. So I still do have that with cryptids where it's like, as much as I love John Keel's theories and these other concepts that a lot of this stuff is symbolic, and I think that that does explain a lot of it. There's just this part of me that has this nostalgia for there to be these just undiscovered creatures. And so that's something that comes up every now and again, especially when I'm looking at Bigfoot accounts. Do you think that then, like, will we see this across other creatures as well? Like, maybe even like lake monsters, things like that.
Are you referring to the camouflage ability? The thing about camouflage is that camouflage can also, it doesn't have to just be like the way your skin looks or the way your outward appearance is. Behavior is also camouflage. Animals behave in certain ways to become hard to see. So something large like a lake monster, it could definitely be employing some kind of mimicry or some kind of behavior to become camouflaged, for sure.
Yeah, that paranormal mimicry too. I know that was something that Keel spoke about every now and again. And I think it's an intriguing concept. And I wonder too this is one of those things that's kind of at one of these liminal spots in the research where we could say then that there are these physical creatures capable of mimicry. We could say too that then this other phenomenon, whatever it may be, this more vague and nebulous intelligence could also use that. There's something that I've wondered because people will claim that people see ghosts of people. They also claim to see ghosts of dogs, cats. There's this place in Wisconsin known for phantom chickens. And I know that some people have
Wow.
postulated, yeah, Chicken Alley. These people apparently think they've run over some poor farmer's chickens. Then when they get out, there's no chickens to be seen. So I know there's this concept. Then some people have postulated that possibly these high strangeness accounts, especially with Sasquatch, could be due to some sort of phantom manifestation of a very real creature. I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Wow. Phantom manifestation of a very real creature. Phantom manifestation. Huh. That's interesting. I mean, okay, the first thing I'm thinking of is like this is a ghost, perhaps, of a creature that did exist. Is that what where you're going with phantom?
Yeah, it's
How do you define phantom?
that's another great question. And I know because this is a relatively newer theory, I would say, where some people have even, I guess there was even a researcher who, I can't remember the name unfortunately right now, who theorized that maybe Bigfoot as a whole, like the entire phenomenon, might be some sort of phantoms of some sort of relic species that no longer exist but did at one point.
Oh, okay,
Um,
very good.
yeah.
That's where I was hoping you were going with, because I do have a lot to
Okay.
say about this. Okay, so check it out. Humans are actually very lonely today. We're lonely today in the fact that there used to be a time when there were several human-like species that coexisted with us, non-humans. Neanderthals.
Mhm.
Homo florensis, very small people. Um, and there's a lot more. They eventually died out, or so we think, or they interbred with us. So there's a lot of precedent for these non-human humans to be around that were intelligent and creative, and they had their own culture and dreams and aspirations. So the fact that some of these could be memories of some of these creatures, I mean, that's totally possible. It yeah, it seems like sometimes energy is left over after an event or someone passes away or something, which may be a phantom, may be an explanation for a phantom.
So, kind of on the flip side then of looking at Bigfoot as, some sort of undiscovered species, or even the phantoms of a relic species, what do you think about the cases, especially from Stan Gordon's Silent Invasion, where Bigfoot was showing up at the same time as UFOs?
Yeah, man. Okay, so Zelia turned me on to Silent Invasion, sent me select passages, and man, they turned my brain to jello. I was like, I lost all frame of reference. Up was down. It was like riding a roller coaster. These Bigfoots were doing incredible things, like possessing people,
Hmm.
being associated with a craft. They had red glowing eyes. It's crazy.
And
Okay,
this is a
go
loaded
ahead.
question, I know, because, classically speaking, I feel like, Bigfoot was already kind of on the fringe. Ufology has always kind of been on the fringe. And then you say that, you've seen Bigfoot riding around in a UFO. People think you're crazy. And so, we have these cases though where it was showing up time and time again. I know too, the Rochdale, Indiana creature of 1972 and even Momo the Missouri Monster were observed in areas that also had sightings of fireballs in the sky. So this is by no means an isolated occurrence, but it still does kind of bear that stigma, I would say.
Okay. I will say, I think I've thought about it, I pondered this, and I think I have multiple things to say. Unfortunately, they're all speculation because we
Mhm.
don't have a lot of hard facts, but I think there are threads that we could go down further as researchers, okay, to describe these things, okay? So let me just make a couple points. First, I think perhaps we show a bias in how we visually analyze Bigfoot because I think we automatically see what Bigfoot looks like and we don't think intelligent. We certainly don't think more intelligent than us. And I think we need to get rid of this concept. You know, it's
Mhm.
maybe internal. I think we need to start thinking of the possibility that this animal is hyper intelligent, very, very intelligent, despite what it looks like. Okay. Um, and then I think another idea is that, you know, UFOs bother humans, right? Uh, you know, they could be a fly in the ointment. Why wouldn't they
Mhm.
bother Bigfoot as well? You know, why wouldn't they mess around with Bigfoot as well? You know, if Bigfoot is just another discrete entity on this planet, that's another thing. You know,
Mhm.
Uh, a third option is, you know, what if some Bigfoot are the occupants or pilots of UFOs? You know, that is just what they look like. You know, and I guess another thing to account for some of these weird things would be to just say they have radical adaptations, like they perhaps have telepathy, so they could communicate with the UFO occupants. Perhaps, I think a big one, perhaps, I suspect some Bigfoot have the ability to make and use portals. You know, they could open a tear in space and time and go somewhere else and vanish. And yeah, so you know, I just shout out like three little things. But to me, honestly, I have to be honest with you. That answer to me is very unsatisfying because it's like I feel even more. Somehow I feel even more confused, even though I have three possible explanations.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think that it is just it's really it's a difficult hurdle to kind of get over because I know when I started this, I was very into the separate phenomena, cryptids, UFOs, ghosts. And then all of a sudden you reach this point where it appears that you can hardly kind of draw the lines between them anymore, that they're showing up in the same spot or leaving the same after effects. And then add into that too, my most recent major interest has been really trying to understand the fairy faith, which it seems to have been just almost a worldwide rapport between people and whatever else there may be. And something that occurred to me while reading Joshua Cutchin's and then Timothy Renner's new book, Where the Footprints End, which is split into volumes 1 and 2, which is just super fantastic, is especially the action of people who try to communicate with Bigfoot by gifting, which is a really common practice now for Bigfooters to put out food or small gifts for the Sasquatch. They've compared that to the long held practice of leaving out offerings for the fairies. Again, this was done extensively, especially in the British Isles. So, to add into already this confusing kind of triangle of ghosts, UFOs, and cryptids, now we also have this, folkloric angle as well. What's your take on that, I guess?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. So once again, there's a connection between Bigfoot and another paranormal phenomenon, fairies, gifting, and the relationship between the fairies and people that give them gifts, and the relationship between Bigfoot and people that give them gifts. You know, that kind of reminds me of another relationship that Bigfoot have with another paranormal entity. So you did a great video on the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter,
Oh,
and
thank you.
you're welcome. And if you recall, you know, the people there shot at these creatures a lot, and it really
Mhm.
didn't have any effect on them, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so to me, a lot of like the silent invasion stuff, the way Bigfoot was acting when it was shot at, it was like vanishing and acting strangely. I see a lot of parallels between the Kelly Hopkinsville account, you know.
Mhm. Oh,
So
definitely. Yeah.
yeah, it's like it's almost like yeah, outwardly everything is different, but some core things are exactly the same, you know, which makes me think that I don't know, maybe the appearances are very deceiving there, you know. So I guess you know this isn't a new idea, but I guess what I'm trying to say is perhaps the events that happen in the book Silent Invasion involving Bigfoot and strange behavior, the Kelly Hopkinsville case, And some of the fairy cases, perhaps they're all caused by the same thing. Perhaps it doesn't look anything like what those three descriptions are. Perhaps there's an underlying truth there to explain those cases. Yeah.
I feel very much the same way that the appearances are almost constructed somehow to garner a certain belief or to cause a certain effect. And the outward appearance really doesn't matter so much. It's the behavior of the things that are seen that's more important. And that brings up too, and I realize that we are close to the hour here, so I will try and summarize this question. But something that I'm actually my next video, which by the time this is released will have been my last video, is on something that I'm really interested in, and that is faceless entities. And again, this is one of my favorite things because it's one of these weird, really creepy sort of concepts that pops up not just in one aspect of the paranormal, but in all the big three. We've got ghosts, UFOs, and cryptids. People are reporting these faceless entities. And I know that in the past you've discussed the Dover demon, kind of, some of the different ideas with that because that too was it had eyes, but it didn't really have the same face that we're used to. And so I guess, I would just like to hear sort of what you think about any of that, entities without a face, the Dover demon. Yeah, I'd like to get your take on that.
Okay. Entities with the Face is also actually a very cool name for a band, but it's also an interest of mine. And I got turned on to them by the name of Shadow People.
Mm, mhm.
And so let me tell you an account and tell me if this sounds like what you're talking about. Is this the same
Yeah,
entity?
sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
So there's this great channel called Thinker Thunker. Are you familiar with Thinker Thunker? Great Bigfoot channel.
I have not heard of that,
Oh,
but that's a
dude,
fantastic name.
you're gonna lose your marbles. So this guy is an expert at video analysis, and he I don't know how, but he finds all the most random videos of Bigfoot, and he sits there and pixel analyzes it and does experiments and really gets to the nitty gritty. And he's a lot of times the conclusion is like, this is a real large ape creature.
Wow. Yeah.
I've seen videos there that nobody talks about. So anyway, Thinker Thunker, he has a sister channel, I guess, called like I think Wow News. And in that channel, he gives his account. He said he was sleeping in bed with his wife. He woke up. At the foot of his bed was a faceless man with a weird hat on,
Mm,
completely dark. This
yeah.
weird faceless man picks up his foot by the toe. Okay, picks it up. Thinker Thunker rears back and he kicks him as hard as he can right in the chest. And he makes contact, and the faceless man stumbles back and disappears. Turn on lights, he's gone. Does that sound like a faceless entity to you?
Yeah, I would say that that definitely fits the bill.
There's a lot of these accounts
Yeah.
it's to me it's very disturbing actually,
Mhm,
and I've talked to a lot of people who've told me similar accounts, and unfortunately, these things can do a lot more harm than just pick up your foot by the toe.
mhm.
And just one thing where my mind goes to, this is what I think is going on. Perhaps to me this rings as I think these are human or human-like. That I think what's actually happening is whoever's doing this, they're human or human. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people are like, we had a guest on the Black Lotus live show, and she was convinced that these things were demons, like from the Bible demons. I was like, okay, yeah, they sound evil, and I was like, what is the solution? Is there an equivalent, a being that is not malevolent? And she said Jesus, and she was like, yeah, Jesus, and she was like, just pray, stupid, She's like, it's right there, Literally, the world is telling you Jesus is there. I'm not saying this to belittle her. I mean, I'm just saying that's what she thought, and I was like, interesting, very
Mhm.
interesting. A lot of people like they give explanations to something and they stick by it. We talked about that earlier. To me, perhaps it works because perhaps what's happening is perhaps your explanation is not the important part. Perhaps the important part is the methods that you use to vanquish whatever it is, to beat it. That's what's really important, really. Um, so if her methods work and she believes it's a demon, well, then I'd say good for her. But me, I personally think it's perhaps Um, yeah, I think it's just criminals. I think it's criminals, bad people doing this. And I don't know if they're like contemporary. They could be contemporary people that have the technology, like I said, or they could be non-humans. They could be from another place and time completely. But I do think that's perhaps what's going on.
It's just intriguing because we've kind of come full circle. This is um, very similar to Ivan T. Sanderson's theory on poltergeists that he nailed down in Invisible Residence. So
I love
it's almost
poltergeist.
surreal.
Can
Yeah,
you tell me about
it's
this?
almost yeah, sure. It's almost surreal to hear it because it was his concept that the poltergeist was some sort of civilization or member of a society that had advanced so far that it advanced past intelligence into nonsense. And
Wow.
so the behavior then of this, entity or being, or for lack of a better word, was just the random kind of scramblings of poltergeist activity. And so, your just mention of how it possibly is something with like, some sort of advanced technology, because of course that was his reasoning was that it had advanced to this point in its technology where it then kind of divested its thinking onto its technology and became in and of itself nonsensical. Very, very interesting concept. Um, it's kind of surreal to hear that. So,
Very cool. Very cool.
yeah, but I suppose we're like almost out of time here. And this has just been a really interesting discussion. There was one final thing I wanted to ask you, if you have the time. Is that all
Of
right?
course. I always have the
Okay.
time.
So, extraterrestrial biological entities. As a biologist, what is your take?
They definitely exist, for sure. I mean, it'd be crazy that it wouldn't exist. I think actually the idea that a lot of them look humanoid, I'm talking bilateral symmetry, the left side looks like the right side, they have two legs, they have hands and fingers, that kind of squares with some experiments that were done that show that evolution can be predicted and plays out in a similar fashion. I think you might have said the same thing in one of your videos, but there's this research paper that says that so in the Caribbean, there's a lot of anoles. Anoles are little lizards. They look like chameleons, but they could really just change to two colors, like brown and green. So yeah, they live all over the Caribbean, and there's so many of them. Some of them are long and slender and light, and they are adapted to be in trees. Some of them are fat and stout, and they're adapted to be on the ground. And some of them are midway, and they're like Darwin's finches, but they're these little lizards. So there was this research experiment where they went to an island that they didn't have any lizards, and they released an introductory population of lizards, and they were just all the same type. They came back several years later, and lo and behold, evolution had proceeded the way it had done on other islands. So they had diverged into the different groups. Like some of them were fat and they were on the ground, some of them were skinny. So what I got out of that was like, it looks like in a lot of instances, perhaps, or in this one for sure, evolution plays out in a similar fashion. So if the conditions were even remotely Earth-like, it's possible that these intelligence would look like a humanoid. So that part squares.
That is, oh, sorry, go on.
Okay, and then the other thing is, I do think some of these abductions and sightings of UFOs and UFO occupants, I do think a percentage of them are extraterrestrial. And the biggest thing that people can say against the extraterrestrial hypothesis is talking about the distance involved. But like, there's several ways to get around the distance involved. One, I
Mhm.
know it's kind of cheating, but like, who knows what kind of technology they have, to bend space and time in itself. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Um, if you have a portal, I mean, portals seem to pop up a lot, and they seem to be theoretically possible. If you have a portal, it seems like it doesn't matter where you are. You could just like walk through a doorway and you're on another planet. So I think I think a certain percentage of them are extraterrestrial. Not all of them. It's funny though because there's this guy named. Are you familiar with Richard Dolan?
Yes.
So Richard Dolan, I paid $30 to watch one of his presentations called Alien Agendas. Highly recommended. It blew my mind. Just to give away his little secret, I'm sure he wouldn't mind. But he's strictly with the extraterrestrial hypothesis. He goes full in, and he thinks they're all extraterrestrial. And I mean, I can't really argue because I don't have any evidence. But he seems to have put together a lot of pieces to indicate that there are extraterrestrial mantises, extraterrestrial greys, tall greys, short greys, reptilians, and so yeah, that's just. I mean, I really respect Richard Dolan. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on biological extraterrestrial entities?
Boy. Well, I do think that I mean, truthfully, at where we are with, even what we know, I think it's ridiculous to assume that ours would be the only planet with life. And even beyond that, I think it would be ridiculous to assume that ours would be the only planet with intelligent life as we know it. And beyond that, too, I'm very intrigued by the concept of life as we don't know it. We constantly look for planets where something like us we could live. Um, but what about something that's completely alien, like in the true sense of the word? So I think that extraterrestrial biological entities are definitely out there. I do tend to think that most of the phenomenon that we perceive as alien life, in the form of flying saucer occupants and things like that, even alien abductions, I think that most of it is due to something else. That same kind of that old devil that we've been discussing all night of some sort of intelligence or force that manifests on a subjective and possibly cultural level. But saying that again, I don't believe that by any means at all, explains 100% of sightings. So I'm kind of right there too. I think that every answer for the paranormal is going to kind of end up being kind of a mixed bag of a few different things. So that's the short answer. I could go on a very long tangent, but that's the short answer for today.
Very cool. Very cool.
But I suppose before we head out, I don't know if you'd like to direct people to whatever you're doing right now, any pages that you run, anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
So I have two Facebook groups, and I post a lot of science articles and memes. And yeah, so if you want to follow those and like them and follow them, one of them is just facebook.com/the moss piglet, and there's a period after the and moss. So it's facebook.com/the.moss.piglet. A moss piglet is a common name for a tardigrade, which is a really cool microscopic animal that perhaps is alien in itself. It's its own type of animal. And I've done research on them. So you could go to that. And then if you also go to facebook.com/deepwildtech, just one word. And if you go to Instagram, I am on Instagram as deepwildtech. And if you go to YouTube, I'm there as Deep Wild Tech. And lastly, every week on Sunday, I do a live show with four other guys, which you will be in tonight, Zelia.
Mhm.
And it's called Black Lotus Productions. And yeah, so look up Black Lotus. And every week we talk about different things, and I'll be there every week.
Awesome, awesome. And yeah, at the time of this recording, I'm really, really excited to be on the show tonight. So that should be a fun time. And of course, I'll include links to that across Facebook and my website and everything. So seriously, thank you again so much for being on the show. This was just a really just awesome, super fun conversation.
Yeah, I had a blast. It was very stimulating, and we'll have to do it again.
Oh, absolutely. So once again, I would like to thank my guest, Wild Trees, for a totally intriguing conversation tonight. And a thank you too to my Patreon patrons. You can keep up with whatever else I'm up to at my website, justanothertinfoilhat.com, and exclusive content is available on my Patreon as well. For today, I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.
Doing.